there for a long time in natural healing and is versed in several of the different therapy styles and modalities, and she's going to share her expertise with us today.
Review. Make sure I cover everything here. What I've had requests for is a video version of what I have available already as an audio. I think one of the things that happens when you're dealing with alternative health is the same thing that we get into with a lot of other areas of our life in American culture, where everybody wants to have the answer. And so you hear one person talk, or you see one ad, or you read one article, and acupuncture will solve everything, or herbs will fix everything, or a good antidepressant will solve all of your problems. But it's always, everybody wants the answer. And since every body is different, and everybody's personality and culture and lifestyle is different, it's really important to understand how all of the different modalities work and how they affect each other, so that we don't end up doing 3 different things that all neutralize the effects that the other is trying to accomplish. And I've seen that happen a lot in my practice. So we want to try to educate you as to what some of the different options are that are out there, and how they work, how they're different from each other, how they're alike in each other, with the ultimate goal of getting everybody to feel better, okay? So we want to make sure that you first understand how you work. We have a lot of misconceptions about the human body, one of which being that they're all alike. And so if somebody needs 3 milligrams of calcium, everybody else should need 3 milligrams of calcium. And that's a fallacy that we start with. The class is titled Wood Stoves and the Swamp Thing because I think that those are the 2 analogies that make it the easiest for you to understand how things work in your body. If you have ever seen a wood stove, you know that there are about 3 things really, that absolutely have to be there in order for that wood stove to function. You know that first of all, you have to have a firebox. You've got to have a place that you can put the fuel. And you know that the kind of fuel that you burn determines the quality of fire that you get. So if you put, leftover hunks of your Christmas tree in there, you're going to get a fire that burns kind of low temperature, it burns really fast, does not last for very long, and it produces a lot of smoke as the resin catches fire. If you burn, on the other hand, a hunk of oak or hickory, some kind of a hardwood, you know that you get a long-term fire that burns very, very hot. That's why you can make charcoal out of oak or hickory, but you can't make charcoal out of pine. And you know that it burns relatively clean, especially if that wood has been properly aged. And so the kind of fuel that you burn in your body is going to directly correlate to the kind of fire that you get. If you are burning icky stuff, you are going to get a low-quality fire compared to a high-temperature fire or a high sustained temperature. So your quality of foods, when you're talking about refined carbohydrates, 0-calorie foods, calories are what? Units of energy. So the concept of eating something 0-calorie doesn't really jive, all right? You're going to have a 0-calorie kind of quality fire. You're going to have energy bursts, just like a pocket of pitch catches from that tree, and boom, you get a real spark of heat, and then it dies really fast. Instead of that really sustained high level of energy that you want. If you've heard the word qi in Chinese medicine or Chinese herbs, qi means energy, but qi is also made evident by heat. So too much energy stuck in an area causes heat and inflammation and pain. So it would be considered an excessively hot condition. So you want that life energy to be there. Not excessively, but definitely a high temperature energy is what you're after. So you want to make sure that you've got the right kind of fuel. We'll talk a little bit more about what kind of fuel is right in a minute. The second thing you have to have for that wood stove to work properly is you have to have a damper. There has to be a way for oxygen to move through that firebox. Or you can get this great fire started with a good quality fuel, close the door, and it's over. And your oxygen level is controlled by breathing. And that's one of the things that we forget to do. I saw a plaque that I almost bought for my office one day that said, the 2 things I absolutely, positively must do today. Number 1, breathe in. Number 2, breathe out. Because you will find yourselves at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and realize all of a sudden that you have not filled up breath from here down since you got out of bed. We breathe very, very quickly, and we tend to breathe really shallow. When you breathe properly and take in a deep breath, your shoulders shouldn't have to move. Your ribs should expand this way. That's the way the musculature is designed. So the ribs expand and the oxygen goes in down here and then rises to the top of the lungs and fills you up. When I ask most of my clients to take a deep breath, they go, like somehow lifting the shoulders makes the lungs get bigger or something, and it really doesn't work that way. If you have what a doctor might call a hiatal hernia, which is the stomach protruding into the diaphragm, which is very common because we tend to be very uptight. That's the word we use. We tense up. Oh man, they got me right there when they said that. It's exactly what we do. No, it's fine, really. And we stuff it up and up and up, and then wonder why we've lost a third of our lung capacity. Because you actually do that. You can also affect the heart quality by pulling the stomach up that high and cause hypertension and other problems simply because you're physically putting pressure on the heart muscle. And that's not really what we want to be doing. So making sure that you're breathing properly. If you can visualize in your mind filling up a glass with a pitcher, you know that the water starts at the bottom of the glass and then rises to the top. And that's the same thing that should be happening when you breathe. And it doesn't have to be a big belly breath forward. It should just be in the lungs. This is where the lungs are. They're not here. So being able to expand those really, really makes a difference in getting that oxygen quality through there. The third thing that you have to have for that wood stove to work properly is a chimney. And if you've got a chimney that gets clogged up, you have two possibilities. If you have that kind of scant fire going, that wimpy little fire from that poor quality fuel, and you plug up the chimney, you are going to simply have the fire die. It will suffocate in its own smoke and go out without a room for that vent to be opened. If you have, on the other hand, a really strong fire going in that firebox and you plug up your chimney, you will get either a fire or an explosion. But somehow or other, the force of that fire trying to vent is going to cause that chimney to open up. Either right or wrong, it's going to happen. In your body, you call that getting sick. You vomit, you get diarrhea, you get a rash, or you get a fever. Those are the ways that the body works to get waste matter out. And so if that waste matter is coming out, we call it being sick, and we try to stop the process. That's the way that we're trained. Instead, we need to encourage that along. And that's where you get into things like enema therapies and hot baths and night water therapies and all these other techniques that are designed to help things move and to get out of the body instead of getting them to shut down. Now, we also talk from a health standpoint about two types of people in Western culture. We talk about type A people and type B people. Type A people die from stress, heart attacks, strokes. Type B people die from cancers. And type B people are the people that go for their retirement physicals, are told they have 6 weeks to live, and everybody goes, he was never sick a day in his life. You will not find people getting cancer who have been sick in most cases. Because in most cases, their bodies recognize the foreign element and said, this is not staying here, get it out. Instead of just sort of squashing it off into a corner somewhere and saying, it's okay, we'll deal with that later. It's all right, it's really, no, fine. And that's exactly, personality-wise, we're manifesting the same thing physically in the body, okay? So that wood stove analogy really applies to how your body works. And so when you're looking at somebody, and it's fun to have people that are new in my apprentice group or something, when they'll call and say, well, I was working with this lady, and man, her chimneys were really open. Or, okay, I know she's throwing up, but better out than in. Nice little sayings, and they're fun. And obviously there are points where you don't want to continue throwing up. You get to the dry heaves, it's not productive anymore. And we'll talk about some ways that you can maybe mediate that in a later time. But the idea is, remember that it is necessary that stuff leave. It's got to get out. And you can do things along the way to facilitate that process. The first thing you can do as far as your chimneys go is recognize that you have 4 as a primary means that the body uses to get rid of things. The first chimney most people are familiar with, and that's the bowel. What they aren't aware of is what the bowel is really designed to do. According to Harvard Medical School, the bowel should move once for every meal that you consume. That's what most babies are going to do. Now, that should be an easy, quick, painless process. I had a client one time who had some issues in that area, and she called me up, did not identify herself, and she goes, Kim, I know why they call it a movement now. I mean, it just moves. It just starts at one end, and it stops, and it finishes, and it's just one movement. And I was like, I'm really thrilled for you. And that's, for her, it had been, a 20 or 30-minute process to have to get the bowels to move. The bowel is a single muscle. The colon is a large intestine, is a round muscle, very much like the esophagus. And so just as when you swallow, it should just ripple on down and then drop into the stomach through the diaphragm, the colon, once it's triggered, should start to ripple at this end, move up and across and down and through, and that should be the movement, the process. They did an autopsy study on car accident victims in the 1980s in California. They wanted to find the state of the average American colon, and they figured car accident victims is as random as it could get. And they said that the average person that they autopsied had 20 pounds of impacted matter lining the colon wall. And in most cases, they needed a hacksaw to actually open the colon completely. And so even if the bowel is moving on a regular basis for most Americans, once a day, or on regular, twice a week, every Tuesday and Saturday, whatever the thing is, a lot of people have that tunnel elimination, meaning that there is impacted matter on the colon wall because there's not a complete peristalsis. That muscle doesn't do a full contraction. And so you get matter moving through the center of the colon, but not actually getting off the older matter. And one of the things that happens as people start to increase fiber in their diet, add herbal supplements that strengthen the muscle or whatever else, is they start to find out that they're passing a lot more stuff than they ever did before, and it had to be coming from somewhere. And they find out that it sometimes smells awful and is much darker and tarrier looking, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm dying. And it's not. It's just actually that matter has been there a really long time and it's coming out. And that's important. So you want to have that bowel elimination. The easiest things that you can do for that are get more fiber into your diet and make sure you're getting enough water. The fiber is important because the colon is triggered by nerves in the ascending colon. And when you have fiber, it pushes on those nerves, and that tells the brain, it's full, we should make this muscle start to move. That's what fiber does for you. The other thing that fiber does for you is it helps to absorb especially waste estrogen, excess estrogen, and certain other types of, especially fat-based wastes, and carry them out of the body. So that's why fiber is important, okay? The water is important because the purpose of your colon is to reclaim the fluid from the fecal matter. It's been through the small intestine, so you've taken all the nutrients out and put those into the bloodstream, but the body wants to reclaim the water as well. And so if you are dehydrated and that matter, everything in the body is extra dry, when you start drawing out extra water through the colon, suddenly that matter becomes like concrete, and it simply can't move through there. And so that's one of the first things that you need to do. The second thing that you need to do for the colon is to make sure that the kinds of foods that you're eating are the right kind of fuel. Because if it's the right kind of fuel, the body can break it down completely and get out everything that it needs. And so that leads us into diet. And people, are always asking, well, what do you think about this diet? What do you think about that diet? Well, how about, I was at a conference one day and I had about 8 of those in a row. And so somebody stuck their hand up finally and said, well, what kind of diet do you recommend? And I said, if it's the way it grew, I eat it. I'm not a vegetarian. Some people should be. Depending on the quality of your stomach function, you may or may not do well with more protein or different types of protein. And I don't believe that there's one diet that everybody should follow. And I have literally had clients back to back where one of them I told I didn't care what they ate as long as it wasn't protein. For the next 3 weeks, I don't want you having soy, I don't want you having fish, I don't want you having meat. Your stomach needs a rest. Stomach's where you digest protein. And right behind them had somebody else come in and said, you know what? You're fine with protein. I want you to eat some cultured foods, but I want you to really cut back on your grains. Even whole grain, 100% whole grain stuff is going to stress you right now. Your pancreas head isn't producing the enzymes you need to break the starches down. Just give it a rest. And most people, it's not that extreme. But for most people, there is something that's going to work a little better for you than it does for other people. And that's why, is there validity to the body type diet? Yes. Is there validity to the blood type diet? Yes. Is there validity to all these different diets? There is, depending on the quality of function that you have in the different areas of the body. The one thing that is consistent for everybody is that everybody needs more raw food. The reason for that is that raw foods have enzymes in them that your body uses to break that food down. So if you've ever, for example, imagine throwing out a cabbage leaf or an apple into your yard. If you leave it there for a period of days or weeks, what you will find is that cabbage leaf or apple will basically continue to age. And it will eventually just kind of break down into its original components and fertilize that little patch of grass. If if you threw a boiled cabbage leaf out into your yard, would you get the same response? Probably in 2 or 3 days, you would have a moldy, slimy, icky, smelly mess. Because without any enzymes there to accelerate that breakdown process, you would rely on those other entities to come in to break that matter down. So those molds, those fungi, those bacteria that cause the smell and the decay and all the rest are just doing their job, which is taking care of that dead decaying matter. We're going to touch on that some more later. But your body has to produce enzymes to break down everything that you digest. As I said, in the stomach, you produce the enzymes for protein digestion. In the the pancreas, you produce the enzymes that break down sugars and starches and fats. And then in the gallbladder, you produce, actually the liver, the gallbladder distributes bile, which helps to keep the fat emulsified, meaning in solution in the bloodstream so it doesn't clump up in your body. So if one of those isn't working, it's going to change the types of foods that you can digest well. So some people, get gas or whatever when they eat meat, and some people get gas or indigestion, whatever, stomach aches when they eat certain types of grains or whatever, based on what enzymes you're producing or not producing. But we were never meant to eat entirely cooked foods. We don't produce enough enzymes all by ourselves to digest anything that we take in, and we need that from the raw foods. It doesn't always have to be cold. Raw doesn't mean it has to be a salad or an apple out of hand. You can take soup and grate your carrots or celery or parsley or whatever else into the soup after it's cooked or steamed, and you'll see them get that bright, bright color like when you stir fry. And what that color comes from is the activation of those enzymes. They're coming to life. If you have ever cooked broccoli till it dies, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It gets beautiful and bright and green, and then it goes gray. You just watched it die. That was when the enzymes were killed off, and that's when you lose the ability to break down a lot of those foods. And so you want to have those raw foods to do that. Now, the suggestion I've always given my clients is that you really want to try to have at least 3 raw foods in a meal. And that's a reach. People do lettuce and tomato on a sandwich, but they don't do lettuce and tomato and onions, or apples and cucumbers and lettuce, or 3 kinds of lettuce, or whatever else. So on a sandwich, you can usually do that. I've explained how you can get that in a soup. You can do the same thing with finely chopped vegetables in a baked potato. You can toss them into an omelet, something like that. So again, you get them warmed but not cooked. You can do that in your oatmeal. Instead of buying that apple cinnamon stuff that's mostly natural, I use the word loosely because they're not really flavors. Natural flavors means it tastes like something in nature. Legally, that's the definition of a natural flavor. MSG is classified as a natural flavor. So you're not getting anything with that word. It's not a legislated word or a protected word. But you can take apples and almonds and bananas and chop them up and throw them into your oatmeal. Same thing. Stir it into your hot oatmeal, and you've got essentially a raw food, but it's warm. When it's cold out, you don't want just cold food. You need the extra warmth, and that's fine. But try to get the 3 raw foods in a meal. The snack rule is at my house, if it's the way God made it, you don't have to ask. And so my kids can help themselves to carrots, apples, radishes, whatever, but they have to ask me for an organic corn chip or a whole wheat cracker, which are good foods, but they're not live foods. And so that's the emphasis. Right now there's a huge trend. Raw foods is the big fad, and that's fine. Some people are real comfortable with that. Some people do well with that and want that. But you have to make it. Most of us are not going to be able to put in the time it takes to eat extremely or strictly raw foods on a regular basis and get the entire variety of diet that we should have. And so I am a real life person. I have 4 children. Right now I have only 2 at home. The other 2 have moved on a little bit, although one will be back for the summer. I have had the 5 different meetings to be at one day. I run a business, I homeschool, so I understand that life is not about everything that you can cook. But I also know that I can keep a raw food bar or a handful of nuts or something like that in my car, and when my kids are crazy, we could do that and we didn't have to hit the drive-thru. So sometimes it's about a compromise, but there are good compromises and there are just wasted choices. So those are the things you want to look at. What can I do better? And I'm really, really big with my clients on what's the next step. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And it's something that we do to ourselves. Well, I can't do it right, I might as well not bother. And so if we're not going to eat all organic and all raw and all the rest, we might as well hit the fast food restaurants. And, so we need to find a better middle ground there. A bag of spring mix and a rotisserie chicken is a much better choice than a packaged salad from a drive-thru restaurant. It won't have as many sulfites. Yes, that rotisserie chicken's going to have some artificial flavors in it, but I guarantee it's going to be fresher, and it's not going to have as much stuff as it would if you picked it up somewhere already put together. So, make those choices a little bit better. So that raw food is the first guideline that I think people need to do to get the diet back on track. And it was fun when they came out and said everybody should have 5 to 9 vegetables a day. So people did 3 raw foods in a meal, they'd have all 9, and not only 9 vegetables, but 9 quality vegetables and digestible, absorbable vegetables. So that's what you're aiming for, fruits, vegetables, whatever. So that's the first guideline. The other guideline that I think everybody needs to address in their diet in America is I think everybody needs more digestible fat. And I can sort of feel some of you going, but fat, it's bad. Fat is the essential nutrient for the reproductive organs, for the brain, and for the liver. Those 3 organs depend on adequate levels of fat. What are the main health problems we have in our society? They're nervous disorders, depression, anxiety, attention deficit, learning disabilities, focus problems. They're reproductive disorders, and they're toxin-related immune deficiencies, which are governed by the liver. So all of those 3 organs that are completely fat dependent are the health crises that we're facing, because we have done 2 things. One is we've started really curtailing the amount of fat, and 2, what fat we have been eating has not been digestible. That's the qualifying word. If now we're seeing trans fats as a bad thing. For how many years were they saying, oh, don't eat butter, it's high in fat, you should eat margarine instead. Now they're saying, oh, don't eat margarine, it's high in trans fat. And what's interesting is that butter, while it has high levels of cholesterol in it, will actually not encourage the liver to produce more cholesterol. 80% of your cholesterol is produced by your body in the liver because it's an essential element for your stability, your function, your brain function especially. So instead, when you put in that trans fat, it causes the body, that hydrogenated fat, causes the body to produce the trans fats, which stress the body, cause it to work more inefficiently. And so you've really created a monster by doing that. Now they have finally acknowledged that, but it's taken 15 or 20 years for them to reach that point. And so always we go back to, gee, the way it was made is the way that it works for us. We were written in the same language that the cows were. So the cow stuff correlates, and our bodies can figure that part out. So most people in America do better with a cultured dairy product, most people worldwide. And when they talk about long-lived cultures, most of them did consume dairy products, but they consumed a cultured dairy product. It was a cheese, it was a kefir, it was a yogurt, it was something like that, simply because they couldn't store plain milk until refrigeration. The fat content of your dairy products is essential. The balance there is correct. The 4% milk, whole milk, actually is the right amount of fat. Now, there are a lot of people who don't digest cow's milk well. So there are a lot of people who are very anti-dairy. Again, I'm saying a lot of people that don't do well with milk do fine with a cultured milk. They do fine with goat's milk. They do fine with other kinds of dairy products, not necessarily cow dairy. But cow dairy yogurt is fine for a lot of people. And the cow dairy cheeses, especially the naturally fermented cheeses. Okay, we're not talking pasteurized, processed cheese slice imitation stuff, but the real deal, okay, real cheese. And that's something that most long-lived cultures have participated in. So those fats are really critical, especially when you're concerned about hormone levels, when you're concerned about nervous disorders and so forth. And so we start people taking low-fat diets and then taking supplements of, evening primrose oil and omega-6s and omega-3s and flaxseed oil and adding all those back in. So just try to get the raw nuts, the raw seeds. Seeds and nuts are one area where it's really important to go organic because pesticides are mostly estrogen-based. They concentrate in ovaries and seeds, and a nut is a seed. The same thing's true of your grains. So you're going to have a higher pesticide level, and especially estrogen-mimicking pesticides, which are a special problem for women, in a nut or a seed or a grain than you would, say, in a piece of lettuce or something of that sort. So that's a really important factor to consider as well. But getting that digestible fat in, which means nothing that says hydrogenated, essentially what a hydrogenated oil is that if you could imagine a fat molecule shaped like this, which it's not, you would go in with a digestive enzyme and that would kind of unlock the energy in the fat and allow it to be broken down and used by the body. What they have done when they hydrogenate a fat is they have stuck a hydrogen molecule in there and bonded it into that space in order to prevent an oxygen molecule from getting in there and oxidizing the fat and turning it rancid. So that's great, it won't ever spoil, but it also means there's no room, there's no place for your digestive enzymes to connect. So a hydrogenated fat cannot be broken down by the body. And therefore it becomes an antigen, it becomes a stress, it becomes something that the body has to figure out what to do with, because what it should do doesn't make sense and cannot happen. So those are the two dietary changes I think everybody needs to make. Make sure you're getting an adequate supply of solid, digestible, healthy, quality fats, and make sure that you're getting at least those 3 raw foods at a meal so that you get those enzymes that you need. Beyond that, what's quality fuel for you is going to be different than what's quality fuel for me or for somebody else, because your body is going to have different strengths and different weaknesses, different needs based on where you live and what kind of lifestyle you have. And you'll need to reflect that in the choices that you make about your own diet. All right, the second analogy that I promised you is the story of the swamp thing. We live in Florida. We actually have swamps. Some of us have swamps in our backyard. And where you have swamps, you get mosquitoes. And I don't know that anybody has ever walked out into the swamp in their backyard and looked at the swamp with all of the little mosquitoes hovering over it and said, those nasty bugs, I can't believe what they did to this nice, pristine, pure, flowing water area. And yet that's exactly what we do in our bodies. A swamp is an area where things have become stagnant, where things aren't moving, and that's why mosquitoes lay eggs there. It's a perfect environment for the bugs. So they lay their eggs there where they can be nice and warm and moist and not disturbed. And then they hatch, and it's a perfect place. In your body, when you have stuff that is warm and moist and not moving, you have created a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. And when that happens inside of our bodies, we say, oh, those terrible bugs, they made me sick. The theory of germs, of disease, hasn't changed in thousands of years. Now, people will say it changed with Louis Pasteur's discovery of the microbe, but it really didn't, because before Louis Pasteur, the theory was that there were evil spirits, and they just randomly, or because you were wicked, or for whatever reason, came upon you and decided to make you sick. Then along came the Middle Ages, and the clergy said, oh, that is a ridiculous primitive theory. It's not evil spirits at all, it's ill humors and vapors. And the humors descend upon you and they make you sick. And then Louis Pasteur came along and said, superstition and nonsense, that's ridiculous. It's not evil spirits, it's not ill humors, it's bugs, it's bacteria. For whatever unknown, unblameable reason, they simply come down upon you and make you sick. So we haven't changed the theory at all. We've just changed the culprit that we blame. And the treatment is you go out and what? You spray the swamp. We're going to kill off all the mosquitoes. And what happens 2 days later? You have another batch of mosquitoes. And you spray them off. And what happens 2 days after that? You have yet another batch of mosquitoes. And so the same thing happens in the body. When you go in and you kill the bugs, you haven't changed the environment. You haven't cleaned up the swamp. And as long as you're creating that perfect environment, just like that cooked cabbage leaf, cooked apple that you threw out into your grass, what you have done is create a situation where it is the moral obligation of the neighborhood bacteria to move in and do their job. Because their responsibility on the planet is to clean up dead, decaying matter. Perfectly healthy trees, uninjured, unwounded trees, do not get attacked by molds and fungi. But when a tree falls and dies in the woods, you start to see all kinds of stuff growing on it, and it disintegrates, and pretty soon that tree trunk is dirt because the bacteria have done their job. They've come in, they've cleaned stuff up, and they've moved it through. So you go back to, let's open the chimneys. Let's clean up the stuff, empty the swamp, and then we don't have a home. There's no reason for these critters to come back in and attack us. And so I told you that that first chimney you were going to try to clean up was the bowel. That's the one that we should be moving 2 or 3 times a day for most of us. And that's the first chimney that we have. And that's why if you've ever read some of the really old natural health books, you know, Back to Eden is the classic that most people started with way back in the 60s, Jethro Kloss's book. Jethro Kloss's solution for just about anything was a high enema. And people would read that book and think, oh my gosh, this guy just had a fixation. I mean, what was his problem? What he understood was that was the principle. Let's get the chimneys open, and that is the fastest way to do it, is to get the colon moving because that's an open chimney. When my daughter was just an infant, 5, 6 months, I was directing a play at our church, and I got the phone call that she had gotten a very high fever and that she was really sick and I needed to come home. And so someone had came and gave me the message, and one of the grandmas in the congregation was there and overheard it. And as I was walking out, she walked up and she said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Sure, what is it?" And she said, "Well, I know this is going to sound really strange, but if you just go home and give her a little bit of an enema, she'll feel much better and the fever will come down." And she was right. Because what you do is you remove that blockage. You start to get things moving in the body, things flushing in the body, and you cool the body internally if you're using tepid water. Now, should people do enemas every day all the time? No, you shouldn't need that function. But you will never, ever get a cold or the flu or anything else without being able to think back, you know what? I was a little stopped up for a couple of days. Things just weren't moving like they should. And you will always be able to track it back. And part of that is probably depletion of minerals and everything just getting tired and all of it working together. But you will be able to document it if you actually watch what's happening. That's one of the reasons that so many women feel icky right before their cycle. As everything starts to inflame a little bit, the uterus is a little swollen with the menstrual fluids. You just get a little bit of puffiness there, which puts a little bit of pressure on everything else and kind of tightens everything up. You also get some extra tension in the muscles, which tightens things up all the way around. And so women get headaches and all these other symptoms. And once they find that their period starts flowing, a lot of those symptoms disappear. And what a lot of women will notice is that when their menstrual flow starts, their bowels also get loose. And those two things start to flow together, okay? The menstrual chamber is specifically an additional chimney, if you will, for women. It's to some extent for men as well. Your body knows you can function without reproductive organs. And so it's one of the common dumping grounds for toxic matter that the body can't break down anywhere. It will dump into the reproductive organs. And that's one of the reasons why your higher cancer rates are in the prostate, the uterus, the ovaries. It's all stuff that the body knows is peripheral. You can get by without those things. The other place that it will dump those excess matters that it can't use anywhere else is in the fat tissues in the body. Fat cells are really good waste grounds, which is why you get cellulite, which is why breast cancer in men is being diagnosed at an increase of 30 to 40% per year. And that's just a nice big, bigger than some than others, but nice collection of fat cells, which coincidentally is also next to the largest lymphatic plate, or one of the largest lymphatic plates that you have in the body. And so those fat cells are another place that the body will store it. So that's why we want to get the stuff moving out the normal chimneys, okay? The second chimney that you have, though, is the urinary system. And that one's probably the most misunderstood simply because people think that your kidneys are designed to get rid of fluid. They're actually not. Their real purpose is to hold on to enough fluid to keep you safe. So kind of like if you make a pot of soup too salty, you make a bigger pot of soup, or a cup of tea too strong, you just dilute it down a little bit. Your body will say, you know what, there is this blood quality is not real good. The fluid, the volume, concentration of waste matter and other things in this body fluid is too high. I'm going to hold on to a little bit of extra fluid to try to dilute things a bit. So then we take a diuretic to tell the body to shut up and get rid of it because we don't want to deal with it. So we're really telling the kidneys they have to work overtime. The kidneys overreact, they get more stressed, and they say, excuse me, but I'm trying to do my job here. So you puff up a little more, so you need a few more diuretics. And that's how that cycle gets started and perpetuated. The way to support that chimney of the body is to drink enough water. Enough for the average person is half as many ounces as you weigh in pounds. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that means you need about 75 ounces of water a day. 8-ounce glasses is only 64 ounces. So that's great if you weigh 128 pounds. There aren't a lot of adults who weigh 128 pounds. So 8 glasses is probably not enough for most people. If you are working outside in the grass, if you are playing tennis in August in Florida, that isn't even close to enough water to keep the body fully hydrated. And that's so many of the things that people will call and ask me about, you know, my headache, I've got this is aching, I'm stiff, whatever. The first thing is, how much water have you had to drink? Water is the lubricant in the body. It's what helps the muscles move within the fascia. It's what helps the joints have sufficient fluid and moisture to be able to be lubricated in the joint tissues. It's what allows the body to flush matter and keep acid to a normal balance. So it is really, really vital that you're drinking enough water. And as I said, that should be about half as many ounces as you weigh in pounds on an ongoing daily basis. The third chimney that you have in your body and in everybody's body is the skin. Now the skin is actually the largest organ by weight and by volume of the entire body. It is not just to cover up the rest of the stuff and hold it all together. It's actually a functional organ, and it absorbs things and it excretes things. And we have a tendency in our culture to completely seal our skin because most of the personal care products that we use are petroleum-based. You may not realize that, but your laundry detergents, your fabric softeners, your shampoos, your soaps, your conditioners, your body lotions, all of them have things in there that are petroleum-based. It'll be a paraben, methylparaben, propylparaben, it'll be some of the lauryls, it will be mineral oil. Those are normal products, normal elements in cleansing products, personal and laundry cleansing products that we use on a daily basis. So if you add all of those up, you may be facing the day every day with 8 to 10 layers of petroleum on your skin because you've got your laundry detergent, you've got your fabric softener, you have your soap, you have the shampoo that's dripped down over your head, you have the conditioner that's dripped down, you get out and put some lotion on, and you just keep layering it on and layering it on and layering it on. Then if you're adding makeups and those things, you know, it's that many more layers of stuff that keep the skin from breathing freely. The best thing you can do for your skin, aside from changing over those products to products that are not petroleum-based, and unfortunately buying them in a health food store doesn't mean they're not petroleum-based. You really need to look for things that are very clearly state that they are strictly vegetable soaps or glycerin, vegetable glycerin, those kinds of things, because it's not going to say on there this is a petroleum product, but that's the norm. So the best thing you can do for your skin, aside from switching those products out, is to do what's called dry brushing, which is before you ever get into the shower, use a loofah, a sponge, a coarse terry washcloth that's dry, and scrub real well your whole body. If you've ever taken a real hot scrubby shower, you know, the kind that you sing in and just hang out in and all the rest, and then 10 or 15 minutes later gotten out of the shower and kind of gone, I thought I took a shower but I didn't scrub well enough or something. What's happened there is that you did such a good job of scrubbing that you got the lymph to start flushing and the body's actually excreting all this stuff through the skin, but by the time it caught up, you were already out of there. So if you do that first, and then get in, you actually start to wash stuff off as it's being eliminated from the body instead of just sort of getting that process started. The fact that you absorb things in the bath is just because those things, water seeks its own level. So the level of calcium or magnesium, say if you're taking an Epsom salt bath, the level of magnesium in the water wants to be the same in the water in your cells and in the water in the tub. So you'll absorb that excess magnesium into the body to try to do it. The same thing's true on going in the other direction with some of the things like bentonite and all that tend to draw matter out, is to try to stabilize levels of different elements in the body. And that's why baths can be therapeutic, depending on what you're putting in there. So the skin is really, really a critical organ to get functioning and to get it working and working well. The fourth chimney that we have is the respiratory membranes, the mucous membranes in the body, which actually go beyond the respiratory system and into the digestive system. Your mucous membranes are your #1 protection, and they just figured this out a few years ago. But when you're exposed to anything, virus, bacteria, whatever else, how do you catch a cold? You stick something in your mouth, you rub your nose, you wipe your eye, and that germ is absorbed into the mucous membranes. And so that's why they say, you know, you're more likely to get a cold by touching somebody and then touching your face than you are by breathing their germs or being in the same room with them. If you don't exchange it, you're not actually putting that germ into the mucous membranes as directly. And what they didn't know until a few years ago was that that's also the initial trigger for the immune system. That when that bacteria or virus or whatever else hits the mucous membranes, you get at a more discrete level the same reaction you get when a piece of sand hits a mucous membrane. You know, you inhale a grain of something or get something in your eye, you immediately start to coat it with mucus. And you start to sneeze, or you start to get the, something in the eye, the tissue in the eye going, and that's so that the body can coat it and remove it. And the same thing happens with viruses and bacteria and other things that you breathe in, and it also then communicates back to the rest of the body, hey, by the way, there's bad guys coming. And so it sets up that initial immune response when you have that. So the mucous membranes are really, really important. It's important, though, to realize they are the fourth chimney, and things back up in that order. So when people are talking about having allergies, having stuffy noses, having puffy eyes, you're looking at somebody who's already got 3 other systems backed up. And that's why when you read Jethro Kloss and he says take a high enema for a cold, you take the high enema and suddenly your nose starts to run. Because now it's not just the nose that's trying to handle things. Everything else is working along with it, and so the chimneys all start to open up and move a little more freely. And that principle of opening things up is where you get a lot of the old-time practices, like in Ayurveda, it's common to inhale salt water and clean the sinuses on a regular basis, just on a daily basis. You do that as part of your, like we brush our teeth, they clean the sinuses. It's just part of a cleansing routine. They use, in Ayurveda, they use a tongue scraper. And in Chinese medicine, you want to just flush out, and that's just the same idea. Let's clean out all the mucous membranes. It's another concept of let's clean the chimneys out. And it's depending on your body and your lifestyle, you may or may not want to do those things. But understand that that's the reason behind it. Let's get things opened and let's help things to move. So those kind of get you started with how things really work inside of you. And with that kind of information, then you can start making sense of why you would want to use an herb or a homeopathic remedy or an essential oil or something else, because you understand now what those are going to start to do. All right, any questions on all that part? Is that all clear? Go ahead.
This skin part, I'm still trying to figure out, when you read all the different labels, how you're still going to know that you're getting stuff that is good and not good.
It is really tough. Right now, it's even misleading when you see on the label 100% organic skincare, because the cosmetics industry and the personal care industry is permitted to use the technical definition of organic, which is carbon-based. From a strictly chemical standpoint, organic compounds are carbon-based compounds. And guess what petroleum is made of? Carbon. So you can have a label on a shampoo bottle that says 100% organic, and it technically is correct. But it's not something you would want to be using, because when we think organic, we think, oh, grown without pesticides, So it's a challenge just to do that. I use a tool called muscle response testing and test a lot of things. If it specifically says on there, vegetable glycerin, that's always a safe one. Vegetable oils are safe. When you start, usually you want to avoid anything that's a paraben or anything like sodium laureth or lauryl sulfate. And again, it's misleading and frustrating because it will say on there, from coconut oil. And I heard an excellent comparison recently where somebody said, if you were feeding a baby, you would not think twice about feeding your baby mashed potatoes. And yet nobody would be willing to feed their baby vodka. And yet if you were to follow those same labeling standards and put it on a label, it would say vodka, parentheses, from potatoes. So yeah, technically it's derived from potatoes, but man, there's been a lot of steps in between there, and the end product is very, very different than what you start with. So when you see, sodium lauryl sulfate in parentheses from coconut oil, that's not always a really good sign. So that doesn't give you a real nice clean answer. I wish there was one. Some of the old standards, or Dr. Bronner's has always been there. I mean, they've been around forever. A lot of the Avalon and those products, their soaps are very good. There are some new companies coming out. The European standards tend to be much higher, and the Canadian standards than ours. as far as the quality of things that they will allow. The Australian standard is the strictest.
How about just
For
links
organic.
to read that would give you information, or books or magazines and stuff?
I have a little bit on my website, which is kimwelborn.com. I honestly don't have a real clean, simple answer for that. I wish I did.
Something's vegan. Is it vegan safe?
Vegan means there is nothing animal related. Petroleum is not animal related, except that millions and millions of years ago dinosaurs died. And I don't think that they consider that a problem because the dinosaurs died naturally. We didn't kill them to make it. So vegan means it's not in any way related to animals. A vegan will not wear leather, for example,
Right.
as opposed to a vegetarian who won't eat an animal. A vegan won't do anything that is traceable to an animal. So, but that doesn't affect petroleum issues. So it's a real challenge to find those things out there. Any other questions? Nothing? Okay. David, time on that?
46.
Okay. So you want to change tapes?
Hmm?
Like I said, I'm changing that because, or taping it because people have said, can we get this on video instead of just listening to it?
So why he changes the taste.
Uh-huh.
What's a high enema?
A high enema is an enema that goes into the ascending colon. If you're using like the little fleet enemas, it's usually going to be like a pint. A high enema is a quart or more. The capacity of the colon is actually closer to 2 quarts of total volume. And so the way that you administer a high enema is to lie on the left side and let about a third of it go in, and then roll onto the back and let a third go into it, and then roll onto the right side, because that's the direction that the colon moves. And then lie on the right side for the last portion, and that just allows that full lubrication.
So
So it's just, the
left side
difference is
back,
just the volume.
Left side back, right side?
Right, and that's because, as I said, the ascending colon is on your right side. So matter enters from the right, goes across the top, goes down, and then the sigmoid colon is from the left down to the center and out the rectum. And so the high enema is just the higher volume and actually reaches up higher into the colon.
And, I mean, I'm sure they must sell a special,
Well, a traditional enema bag, if you've seen those, is usually going to have a 2-quart capacity. And that's what they're using, like if, in the old days when women had to have enemas before they could have babies, they would use that whole 2 quarts and they would just irrigate because that was about how much fluid you should be able to hold if there's no fecal matter left in there. So that's the idea behind it. Most people that are using them today, Fleet, that makes the little disposable thing, also makes something they call a bag enema. And that's what a doctor will have you do if you're going to do, like the barium enema, x-ray testing or something. They will have you do an enema prep, which is usually the Fleet bag enema that they tell you to buy. The reason that people like that is that it doesn't have a real bulky plastic nozzle. It's just real soft vinyl tubing. So that's
you
the
just
difference.
hold it in as long as you can.
Yeah, you usually don't want to hold it more than 10 minutes. Most people won't hold it that long anyway. The exception to that would be if you're trying to rehydrate. Somebody who's been very dehydrated, that's a really fast way to rehydrate them. And so you could use, colloidal minerals or vinegar if you were in an emergency type situation. Cider vinegar would work because it's high in minerals. Molasses would work because it's high in minerals. And those things would just be absorbed through the colon very, very rapidly that way. So you might find that you don't eliminate at all, especially in somebody who is extremely dehydrated, simply because the body is just going to suck all that water right back in there, assuming that the colon's not full of
So
other stuff.
the apple cider vinegar will help it absorb that.
Cider vinegar is one of the best sources of trace minerals. It's just a really high, that's why it's always, the tabloid cures, when they can't figure out what else to put on the cover of the tabloid. It doesn't, this week it's channeled by Mother Teresa, this week it's from the aliens, this week
So
it's
they have the
rediscovered
apple
in the
cider
caves in Turkey, and it's always apple cider vinegar, usually cayenne pepper, and then sometimes garlic, sometimes molasses, sometimes honey. But pretty consistently, whoever channels it through gets the cider vinegar part in there.
What about deodorant? I know you're supposed to do aluminum free. Do you have like one that?
Deodorant is the same way. There's actually another problem with deodorants that are aluminum free, and that is mine just went blank.
Stop.
It'll come to me. Yeah, it's a triclosan. It's a chlorinated bactericide, so you're absorbing the chlorine, and that's not real healthy either. And you know, the residual nature of those, like laundry detergents, people don't realize how potent and strong that petroleum bond is. When my son comes home from staying with my mom, she uses traditional fabric laundry detergent and traditional fabric softener. Now you need fabric softener with a traditional detergent because that petroleum has stuck to the towel or stuck to whatever, okay? So you have to have the other chemical come in there to change the effect of that bond. It doesn't break the bond and remove the detergent, it just bonds along with it and makes it soft and flexible. I have not used a fabric softener 20 years, David, are our towels soft and fluffy? I can even put my towels on the line and they come off soft and fluffy.
So what do you use?
And I use either Lifetree laundry detergent or BioPack laundry detergent. Lifetree is my favorite. Or I'll use something called Nature Sunshine Concentrate for my laundry. That's what I've always used for my babies and anything real delicate that I'm trying to wash. It's not real good on dirt, serious dirt. And I had 3 boys out of 4, so I got real familiar with dirt. And men that developed white baseball pants, what are they thinking? With red clay, let's slide these boys in white pants. So the Lifetree and the BioPack I found were more effective on dirt. Ecover or E-Cover makes an awesome stain remover, so that works great. But the Sunshine Concentrate Cleaner is the only thing I have found that will remove the residue of all those other chemicals. But even with that, my son comes home from staying with my mom, I will have to wash his clothes 5 or 6 times before the smell isn't just overwhelming to me. Now, I'm more sensitive to it at this point just because I haven't used them for so long. I can smell it when they're doing laundry down the street, but so can you. Don't you? You come out of your house in the morning and you know which house is doing laundry because the scent is so strong.
Right, especially.
And so it's really a problem, and it's amazing to me how hard it is to get that stuff out. So once you've done that a couple of times, you never want the stuff on your clothes again because you realize it's doing that to you
Do you have
too.
to order this stuff? Or
Pardon?
Do you have to order this stuff, or can you get this like at a Whole Foods?
Most of the health food type stores carry the Lifetree and the BioPack. Those are my 2 favorites. Some of them, as I said, some of them in the health food stores are petroleum based, and some of them also have a lot of fragrance in them. And personally, I'd rather people smell me or my essential oil or whatever than smell my laundry. They don't need that, and it's fun. We walk out and people have to smell our conditioner and our body lotion, our clothes, and then we put perfume on top of that. What should they supposed to smell? Anyway, all right. Now I want to talk about some of the
Hold on. I haven't
different-
changed anything. You kept talking, so I kept it rolling.